again to welcome everybody here today. Richard Capone is joining us, and I wanted to provide just a really brief case update. If you're not familiar with our organization, we provide high quality professional learning, advocacy, and policy around special education. And we have some really exciting events that are coming up. Next month in June, there's the second annual 504 conference. That will be a virtual event. That's with Julie Weatherly, Esquire. There's proposed 504 regulations that are supposed to come out in May. And so you can go to our CASE website and access that registration. I'll put that in the chat in just a little bit. And then another really exciting event that's coming up this summer is the Special Education Legislative Summit. LetsGoLearn will be joining us at this exciting event in Washington, D.C. This happens every year. We meet with special leaders from across the country and learn about federal and state level advocacy, and then spend a day going up on Capitol Hill to talk with our representatives to really focus on special education issues and to advocate for special education nationwide. We're really looking forward to that this year. The last little bit that I would give an update about is Medicaid billing. That is kind of broke this week, that the Center for Medicaid Sciences is actually releasing a guide that took away the requirement of parental consent. So that is hugely impactful for special education leaders and districts as you look at recouping Medicaid funds. So we like to say that CASE is definitely the voice for special education leaders. And if any of the things I shared sound interesting to you, I'd highly encourage you to check out our website and become a member. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Richard Capone.
All right, thank you so much. And I just want to mention that CELS is really a fun event, especially it's very motivating because they make it really easy. They come up with all the stuff we're supposed to say. So when you go into Capitol Hill and start knocking on doors, it's a lot of fun and it's very invigorating for our participants. Last year I did it, and I'm going to do it again this year. All right, I want to introduce Dr. Smith, and he is going to be talking about math today, which is a hot topic. Now, the reason why I want to just bring up how this came about, one of our ed consultants said, you have to talk to this guy. You know, at LetsGoLearn, we have a great personalized learning solution that diagnoses students and delivers SDI. But she said, look, this gentleman is making things happen. He is getting students who are really, really struggling and making them succeed and having an effect on the overall district with graduation rates and everything else. And so when I talked to him, I realized he is a doer and he has operationalized how do you turn things around for math, right? We say we want to do it. You have a great tool, but you have to know, what do I do next? And he has done that. And so that's why we're really excited to have Dr. Smith here today. I am going to turn over to him because I want him to have the most time possible to talk to all of you. And like I said, at the very end, we'll take questions. So Dr. Smith, take it away, please.
Sure. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today, and I want to kind of start out and explain a little bit about how I became a teacher, because I think it's important. I became a teacher because my son was failing high school math. And when he came home for Christmas break, I had to reteach him. And after a while of tutoring himself and also his football classmates, as a result of that, I decided to become a teacher. And I didn't know at the time point that he had a hidden disability. He actually had epilepsy. And I also had another son whose mom was Japanese. When my boys came back, when I was in the Marine Corps, it's over in Okinawa. And when I came back, I had two little boys and they only spoke Japanese. That was a really tough task, trying to get somebody as an English learner for them. So those are the two things personally, myself as a parent. But I am a teacher, and I became a teacher by choice, is because I wanted to help change the way that math was being taught in schools. So now I've come up to this point for the last 19 years. That's all I've done. Every year, I do not get complacent with what is being thrown at me. Virtually what I mean, if something's not working, I'm not going to be stupid enough to keep doing it. Plain and simple. So for every year, I wind up doing it. All right, so let's kind of get into it, because normally I will be speaking about an hour. I get 15 minutes, and I have the mission in order to get my point across. So Mountain View High School is a seat-based continuation school. Normally roughly 250 kids max. They have to be 16 or older. Normally I get 11 to 12 graders severe deficiencies. And when I started 12 years ago at this school, we had one special education teacher that had 4 to 5 students. But today, now we have 2 resource teachers. The caseload's 50 to 60, and one special education teacher, and it looks like indications that that is going to grow. So this is a big problem for us. Not really. I actually expect these challenges and actually look forward to them. But our mission at our high school, our continuation, is to save the graduation rate for our school. In other words, I don't care what the situation, this 11th and 12th grade or how many credits, our job is to make sure that they have the opportunity to graduate on time. Next slide, please. So this is the California school dashboard. I know that a lot of you in the audience are from different parts of the state, but most of us have our accountability in California. This is the dashboard, and these are the 6 areas that we get graded on. And virtually, if you look at them, they're by color. Let you know red is bad, whereas in this example, college and career, English language arts and mathematics. This is our dashboard in 2019. Next slide. So even through the pandemic, excuse me, at the end result of this last year, I want you to take a look at the screen. This is the status of our school district. And I want you to note there's only 3 schools on here that have a no status. One is our Leadership Academy, which is a magnet school, all the special kids there. And then we have Mountain Heights and Mountain View. Those are 2 schools on our campus, which means the alternative schools have no status. In other words, we're not in CSI. Now, CSI, I will explain. CSI is that if you're in red in the majority of those different areas in our state, you will be thrown into what we call comprehensive support and improvement. Also, coming out of the pandemic, now they added the other one, which is called ATSI, additional target. And now what that focuses on is all the subgroups. So now it's actually focusing, and I want you to pay attention here that Mountain View has no status. In other words, not only did we provide improvements with our students as far as school improvement in their academic areas, not just for all the general population, we did it for all the subgroups. Next slide, please. So here are our obstacles that I have as a math teacher. I get students that walk into my classroom, they need 20 to 30 credits of math for graduation. They've given up on learning, they lack motivation. Now you throw in the COVID, which provided additional trauma at home because a lot of our kids had actually lost someone that was close and dear to them. They had a poor relationships with their teachers in the past. In our school, self-directed learning has been the only path because I'm a general education teacher that teaches 4 periods of math. And in each class, I have 10 sections of math. In other words, I have to be a jack of all trades. I teach math 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, whatever it is that student is taking, I have to be up on it. So every year, the problem is I have students that come to me as 11th graders, but yet 3 to 6 months later, 11th graders, they have to take the state test. We have to be ready for the same standards as the regular traditional high school. How fair is that? Then in addition, in 2023, we added the CSI and ATSI. Go ahead. So our past efforts, 2014 to 2019, we did district diagnostic testing 2 times a year. We did online curriculum. We did not do direct instruction because students come to us at different times during the year with different deficiencies. We tried to do close reading. We did thinking maps. The traditional system and the traditional education model was not working. It was not connecting to our kids. But we did start to do something like a math fun day and musology. We did this trying to look for something or some way to get kids involved with learning math. So let's go to the next slide. So the end result is I realized we needed to change our thinking towards engagement. If the kids were not engaged, they're not going to learn. They're not going to want to do it on their own. And I give you an example. During the month of May, I have been out of my classroom for 3 weeks. 2 of the weeks was involved with the state testing because I was doing the state testing. The other week was at conference. Yet, while I was gone during those 3 weeks, I had students completing classes. Why? Because my students are engaged. We've done and actually reviewed other types of online curriculum. We had Edgenuity. We didn't like it because we didn't like the videos. We had Pearson. We had Amentum. Every year, myself and also Professor Lee, we go out to conferences and we go out looking for solutions. And then we find them, we bring them back and we field test it. We've been doing this ever since 2014. Let's go to the next. But we realized that we had to engage our students. So this is what happened in 2021, which resulted in 33-point gains for both math and language arts. What were we doing? First thing we were doing was doing the diagnostics testing. Other thing we started doing was actually doing the SBAC direct instruction. In other words, we were up there kind of teaching to the test in a different way. But then we also did this math fun day that had actually been doing 3 days, is when I took my students, even the ones with disability, we would bring an elementary school over and we would do math games. Something happened there. What happened? I had students that were not interested in math, but when we started bringing out the games, and then they were actually teaching kindergartners and first graders, that student changed. All of a sudden, math became something fun. It had a purpose. It had a reason why of why they wanted to do that. They had a purpose for coming to school. My students did not miss school during those days for that opportunity. Close reading. I realized my students were scared of word problems. But how can I do that? I realized as a teacher, I need to define an engaging way to do that. And that was one of the things I did. I don't have time to go over it. Next slide. So in 2023, here is my real big problem. One, that if I stuck to the traditional path, I get 11th graders, and if I only taught them Math 1 and Math 2, guess what? They'll never see the content that was on the SBAC test. Next, I knew for a fact, ever since I was a teacher, starting out as a high school algebra teacher, I used to complain that my students didn't have their fundamental skills. But I also knew this as a teacher. If the student does not have the fundamental math skills, a solid foundation before they come in high school, they're doomed for success. I mean, they're doomed to fail, plain and simple. But also, as a general education teacher, I would have a resource or a special ed teacher come to me and ask me to sign off on IEPs. But those IEPs documents were all aligned to 4th and 8th grade standards, but then I'm being stuck as a general education teacher to stick to a pacing guide that's on 11th grade standards. The system is broken. It doesn't work. So since 2021, I've realized these are the 3 things I have to start working on. First of all, the number 1 problem is learning loss, okay? The kids that were coming into my classroom, their scores were so low is that they had learning loss. 2, I had to figure out a way how to motivate my students to learn. And 3, whatever I did teach them, I need to make sure that they got hooked on it, they enjoyed it, and more importantly, that they remembered whatever I taught them. Next slide. So what works? This is what I found out that has actually worked in our classroom, that's gotten us out of CSI, gotten us out of ATSI, having my students continue to work and learn. At the same time I'm speaking with you right now, I have students in my classroom engaged in learning. Diagnostics testing. Before we would do diagnostics testing, but you can't do diagnostic testing just for testing. Just to give them a test gives no value and it doesn't motivate them, and you're going to get crappy results. Next, build a relationship. I realized that I had to build a relationship. I remember I started out that I became a teacher because my son was failing math. How do I get him to turn around to learn a whole semester in math in 2 weeks? It's because I built a relationship with my son. We looked at the problem and we were like a team working on the same problem that he agreed and actually had to buy in. So I had to build the relationships. That meant I actually explained to them about their learning style, about the importance about mindset. I knew that if a student had a fixed mindset, I could forget about the curriculum. I don't care what you tried to teach them. If they think that they can't do it, you're wasting your time. I had to learn how to motivate my students to learn. I had to help them to deliver and develop their why. And one of the things that Math Fun Day has been going on with our school and at elementary school for the last 7 years. That's never going to stop because that's an engagement tool. Math discourse. How do I get my kids to start talking about math? I actually have my students write about math. The main thing is focus on student engagement and learning. Next slide. 11 key strategies. So I'm 69 years old. I'm still enjoying teaching, and I'm probably going to be still teaching here for the next 4 or 5 years. And that's because I loved it. So I decided to start writing about it. And I do have a book which is out on Amazon right now. It has 11 key strategies. We don't have time to go over it. I want to focus on the ones here now. Is that I need to learn how to motivate my students. But the most important thing, the reason why is because I need to help them overcome their mistake anxiety. And that's not a typo. I didn't mean math anxiety. I said mistake anxiety, because if I can talk to my student and show them that math is okay to make mistakes, and the better that you get making those mistakes and seeing the benefits, the light clicks on. I get buy-in from my students. So I help them to develop a growth mindset. But the most important thing, I teach them how to be confident in my classroom. Next slide. So what has been our best solution so far? What is that key thing that's working? One, student motivation engagement. I've mentioned that 3 or 4 times. That's the key. A hybrid model. I get my students to do self-directed learning with me as the tutor for when they get stuck. In order to do that, I have to have special tools to do it, because it just doesn't work with any type of software platform. But the main thing is this: whatever you're using, whether it's LetsGoLearn or whatever, what you have to have is a solid diagnostics program that's going to drive the personalized instruction, that's going to work on the deficiencies for that child, that the teacher understands what's wrong and the student understands, and they buy in together. Once they buy in together on that team, that student can do anything. Next slide. So our experience with LetsGoLearn, part of it was like accident, but part of it was because I mentioned about every year I go out to conferences. Our student, my school principal was smart enough to realize that he needed to send me out. And if he had a teacher like me that was going to always look for solutions, I'd never come to my principal with a problem. I'll come and say, hey, this is not working, but I recommend we do A, B, or C. And after looking at it, I recommend B. And he says, go forth. And I do. So this is as a result of this. So it was at a conference. First, I got a demo on it. I didn't really fully understand everything, but also knew at the time point I had 11th graders. Now, this year's 11th graders are special because these 11th graders had their first freshman year and their sophomore year in the pandemic. You're talking about learning loss being multiplied on an exponential rate. That's exactly what you got. So I had 11th graders not performing. I had 12th graders with the IEPs not performing. All of the diagnostic tests that I got from the district mandated diagnostic tests showed that my students were at grades 3 and 4 level for math skills. So in November, I kept on going with everything. But in November of this past year, I noticed that my students were actually hitting a brick wall. I mean, everything else I had done, but they were hitting a brick wall. So I started doing field testing. And as a result, I started concentrating. And then that's what I actually activated as far as LetsGoLearn. I got my students. So I said I was going to test it. So first what I did was pull my 12th graders that had an IEP. I put them on the program. I actually took the one student that had been struggling the most, but they wanted him to graduate. And I actually sat down one-on-one with him, engaged him, identified, and asked him to try it. He took the diagnostics test. I got the report. I sat down one-on-one with the student. We identified what he could do well and what we needed to work on. And I sat down with him with the first lesson and we worked it. And after that, he says, I got this, doc. So then I did 11th graders that had an IEP. Then I started doing the non-productive general education students in my class and got them on the LetsGoLearn and the same problem. Then I did the special education. The end result is that one by one, even the students who I did not talk to, who were not on the program, came up to me and said, Doc, I want to try Let's Go Learn. And I said, are you sure? And they said, yes. I said, okay, this is how we're going to work. The end result, that little experiment wind up going from 0 students to 85 students as of May. Does it work? Let's look at the next slide. So what's engaging? This is what my students tell me. One, the diagnostic format they like. It has color, animation, music, sound. See, the music and sound and the voice inflection kind of goes back to one of the other things I had with my students, like musology. That was math with music, okay? The voices and everything else. The diagnostic report. I have a report that is personalized that I can use one-on-one with my students, and I use that. Positive feedback. I began every feedback with my student positive. I let them know what they're doing well first. Then I go ahead and look at the things that they're deficient in that we need to work on, and then I get agreement. I get that agreement, that buy-in. So the feedback I give them is to improve their learning. They know how they're going to learn it, and they love it because it's one topic that's short lessons. They also like the fact, and I've started, as I've gotten into using this more, I have the students that get a pre-test, they get lessons, then I give them a post-test. But on the post-test, I now look and see where are the deficiencies, and then I'll do a sub-test to dig down a little bit deeper on those specific areas. Next thing, celebrations. Yeah, kids, you may be amazed. Kids love certificates and they love the badges. And next year, we actually will be working with the certificates and the badges to give them a little bit more. Next slide. So how confident am I about the process? It's the most engaging software platform I've ever used for students in 20 years. I get proven results because I'm a man with data, and I'll give you the data on these next couple of slides. I know for a fact how confident I am. You can give me any student that is deficient in their math, and in 4 weeks in summer school, I guarantee you I move them 2 to 3 grade levels. I know for a fact because I've been doing it for a year. It also aligns with the IEP goal summary. See, as a general education teacher for years, I had to sign off on a document on the IEP saying a teacher assessment was given by the general education. 19 years, I've never done that. 19 years, no resource or special education teachers ever came to me as a general education and said, hey, you got to do this assessment. I'm okay because Let's Go Learn's got my back. I already have that. Matter of fact, on my first students, when I started doing it, when I pulled out the IEP, it turned out what Let's Go Learn, it had them working on fully aligned. So I am a teacher now focused on learning targets. Next. Here are the results. These are 3 students, and I have many more. In this case, we're looking here. This student came to my school with 0 credits. 0 credits in a 2-month time frame. They had a pre-test, they did the lessons, personalized instruction lessons for them, and then they had a post-test that I gave them. In this case, in 2 months, this student here raised their grade level about 1.5 years. In 2 months. I would have died or did anything for this as a high school math teacher in the 9th grade. Next slide. This next 11th grader, she was actually the first student that I actually used on the system as a general education student. The student had been in my classroom for 1.5 years. I had tried everything, speaking with this child, and even the direct instructions, she just was not moving until I put her on Let's Go Learn. She worked on holidays and on the weekends. And I knew it worked because after 2 weeks on the program, this student would come to me and say, Doc, I have a lesson that I don't understand. Can you help me? If I get any student that comes to me on any subject and they're asking their teacher, that student is engaged and serious about their learning. They've taken responsibility for that learning, and that student can do anything because they set their mind on it that they can do it. Next slide. This student came to me, in this case, they had already had 10 credits of math, so they didn't have to do as much, but I still look at the growth. This is again in 2 months, okay? Each one of these slides is showing 2 months on the system. In this case, we increased a half a year, but more importantly, I want you to look at the other times. In other words, up in for May 22nd, the highest score you can get is 5, and she's at 4.5. The highest raw score is 14. She's at 13. And the pre-algebra skills is at 8.5. If I have a student like this student's score on the state test is going to go up. They're not going to be on the lower thing. You can tell by my enthusiasm. Now, I said how confident I am about this program. This program is not going out of my school. But the other reason why I'm so confident, if you look in the parentheses, you see where it says came to Mountain View High School with 10 credits of math. In the parentheses, it didn't take them 2 months. This student did this in 12 hours and 50 minutes. That's how much time they were on there. And Richard, can you go back to the next screen?
Yeah.
Go back one other slide. This student who increased 3.21 years, total time, 43 hours. You don't think that I can do this during a summer school? I'm so confident I can take any student and actually get them to learn math. And with that, I need to be quiet because the doc could just keep going up.
So I want to
Richard.
point out too, what's interesting about this, I did take a peek at your class, and there's so many students have a very similar case study in terms of, in a short period of time, they had all this gains. But what's interesting is they all have different gaps. And, it's interesting when you look at the GLS level, like this student went from 3.71 to 6.92. If a student gets to around a high sixth or seventh grade level score, they can actually pass their state test, because most of these students have been exposed to 10th, 11th grade math standards, but they just lack the foundational skills to really implement those concepts on a state test. So it's interesting. It's a little misleading. Sometimes say, well, they're only up at 6 or 7, but that's enough to be proficient, because this assessment, of course, is only testing basic math skills. And so it's going to cap out at high 7th grade.
I also have one other thing to share that was by accident. So I have one of my students which had an IEP that when I gave her the pre-test, I messed up. All my students that got in the pre-algebra, I messed up. I gave her the algebra one. So the student had the algebra one, and she had been on that for 3 weeks, and she was doing the higher level math. And I didn't stop her. And she actually showed growth as well. So now I know what capability, if the students believe and like it and are engaged in it, they can accomplish anything once you set it up. So I already know next year I'll start out higher.
All right, great. So let's go ahead and take some questions. So the first question, Dr. Smith, is how did you approach your one-on-one with the students at the beginning after they did their first diagnostic? Like what kind of report did you use to make sure you can have a meaningful conversation with them?
Well, the one-on-one talk that I have with all my students kind of goes like this. I actually take a marker and draw out the framework for a road. And then I put a marker on it, I'll draw a line. I said, let's kind of explain about your history and learning. And I said, here you are in the 3rd grade. I said, there was probably some things that in your 3rd grade that the teacher taught, but you didn't get. And they'll shake their head. I said, yes. I said, it's probably 1 or 2 things. And I'll draw a little circle. And then I go to the 4th grade and I'll do the same thing with a couple of things you didn't get. They nod their head and I do a little circle. And I'll do this all the way up into the 8th grade. And I said, these circles here, I said, these are like potholes, okay, along your track. In other words, so these are things you didn't know. But what happened when you got to high school? When you got to high school, it's a new system. See, before, all they did was keep promoting you. They kept saying that you met the qualifications, but these holes were there. But then when you got to high school, new game, they're expecting that you had this because they're just teaching based off the pacing guide. And all of a sudden you get a reality check because as a freshman, you got this thing called credit. Seat time didn't work anymore. And all of a sudden you got 0 credit. Okay, and I asked them, how did that make them feel? And most of them said, well, no, that wasn't good, But the thing was, I said, now, before you came into my classroom, did anyone ever speak about this? No. I said, so you know what? If you're going to have success, it's like this road. Don't we fill up these potholes? Yeah. So my question for you, do you want to keep working on math, having these potholes? Or would you like to have another approach I think that may work? And they normally say, what's that? I recommend that we go back and fill these potholes first. Let's build you a new road.
So
And
this is
then
where
let's
you
go ahead.
said you're removing the fear of making a mistake. It's interesting because you're right. A lot of students have never, ever had a conversation. They just know that they're bad in math and they're being put into remedial math or they're failing, and they don't realize that it's not necessarily them, it's situational, right? There's no, a lot of times it's very hard to do a review. You didn't get a concept, that ship has sailed. It's,
Correct.
you're moving on
It's
to the
all
next.
about mistake anxiety, not math anxiety. It's the mistake. If I take that away and we're building and working as a team, that student opens up. And then all I have to do is show them that they have success. And that's why Let's Go Learn. I like the format because it's one topic. I'm not teaching the kids 7 or 8 things and then give them a test. I'm doing one thing. And that way it's easy to isolate that success. And once they get confidence, then that builds it up. Then they think they can do anything.
So here's another question, and this is a good operational one. How would you scale this into a middle school at your district if you were asked to?
Okay, so this is my utopia. The one thing I would do, if I'll put it, if I was a superintendent and I wanted to increase my scores, the first thing I would be doing, how about let's check where our students are before they go to the next grade? Well, can't we do that with Let's Go Learn? I'm saying, hey, how about the 3rd grade? We give the kid the diagnostic, but now you have a diagnostics with personalized instruction, and you can make sure that every student is at grade level because you have a tool to do that. So I would actually have all of my kids actually do a pre-test and a post-test so I could see where they're at and then create a plan. Some schools have actually started doing this for even elementary, but also middle school specifically, are trying to do a bridge. And I know because I was a bridge summer school. They sent me as a high school teacher down to the middle school to work with middle school students that had low math scores. And what did I work on back then? This is like 10 years ago. It was fundamental math. That's what I worked on. I improved their fundamental math, built their confidence, and those kids went on.
So maybe part of it then would be initially having that idea of diagnostic, having a discussion with students, sharing with them their own data, explaining, and really getting that motivation as well. And then, of course, having some kind of personalized learning product.
Sharing the data is key. Most times, students were taking the diagnostics test, and then nobody's talking to them about the results. You have to bring the kid in. And if you have the parent in there on top of that, now you really have a winning plan.
All right, great. I know we're actually over time, so I do want to be cognizant of that. We do have Dr. Smith's email down there, and my email is on the slide as well. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email us. This is a big topic. Just so you know, me personally, I've had lots of conversations with district leaders about how can you implement math reform. And a lot of times it's bigger issues than just the tool. It's about systemic change and changing mindsets and PD and all sorts of stuff like that. And it expands beyond special education because a lot of these policies are set at the CNI level. And so we're happy to have these conversations and support you. I do think, you know, for our standpoint, having a great diagnostic and personalized learning product is key. It's a tool, but then you have to be able to implement it. And that's why we wanted Dr. Smith to share his experience with implementation. Also, we are having a product webinar, I think in a few days. So if anyone wants to see Let's Go Learn, you could attend that webinar, or you can visit our website. And then if you want to talk to anyone else, like I said, we'll give you some more information. We are going to send an email probably tomorrow with the recording of these slides, recording of this webinar with the slides and some additional information. So we'll also put in your information on your book. We did want him to share that with you because I didn't even know about the book, just so you know. And then it turns out after we asked him to present, he said, hey, by the way, I just came out with a book. And I think that's great because, you know, in the end of the day, it's about operationalization, and this is really helpful. So I'll let you have the last word, Dr. Smith, and then we're going to end it.
I am just glad to have the honor to take the time to actually speak with you. And actually, I probably won't be a stranger because I actually believe that there needs to be better education for us as general education teachers about special education. It's always been this little thing over here in the corner. And our school has been successful because the special education class room is right next to my classroom. And for 2 years before the pandemic, we did an inclusive where I brought the kids together. So, and I actually think that that works. The reason it's working also is not just for myself, it's because the resource teachers are on board, the special education teachers on board, and the general education, and we communicate and speak and actually talk about each one of these kids. And because of that, we're working as a team, and that's how you get it to work. So I'm actually committing myself to actually be more of a spokesperson as far as math teachers and specifically concerning special education, because what is happening at my school should be happening at other schools across the country. And that probably can't happen unless you have teachers like me that's willing to go ahead and step forward to actually be an advocate for this area. I think it's so important. All our kids are special. And when I teach, all means all.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Bright. Thank you, Dr. Smith. And we really appreciate Case's support and your sharing of all the experiences, Dr. Smith. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.